Hi, I'm Joe Finsternus, and tonight I'm going to be talking to you about a movie called Saint Nick. First of all, this movie is in the Dutch language with English subtitles, but even if you hate subtitles, the DVD does come with an English-speaking dub track. So, Saint Nick is a horror comedy in which apparently Saint Nicholas was some kind of renegade, murderous, evil bishop until one night these villagers took the law into their own hands and murdered him and all of his helpers. And this just so happened to take place on Christmas night when there was a full moon, so now whenever Christmas falls on a full moon, Saint Nick comes back from the dead and goes around killing people. And there's this quote on the back of the DVD case which misleads you into believing that he just goes around killing the naughty kids. And that's not really the case here. He kills everybody, whether they're young or old, good or bad. He really doesn't discriminate. And the movie starts off with two different prologues. The first one shows Saint Nick on the night that he was murdered, and it doesn't really show him doing anything bad. He's just looking menacing and evil, and he has this inverted cross on the back of his robe as well as on the front of his hat. Apparently he's in some sort of satanic cult. And the second prologue deals with this character. I think you pronounce his name Goert. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. But when he was a little boy, his family was killed by Santa Claus. So he grows up and becomes a cop so that he can protect people from evil. He's basically Batman if Batman didn't have the money for a bat costume or a Batmobile. Surprisingly, though, Goert is not the main character in this movie. Instead, you spend a good chunk of time following this college kid named Frank, who honestly isn't as interesting as Goert, and you spend a good deal of time not only following him, but some of his fellow college students who are also not all that interesting. Don't get me wrong, I didn't really hate these characters. They did have some interesting moments, and they even had some amusing moments, but all in all, they just kind of felt like bodies waiting to be counted. But once Santa Claus does come to town and he starts killing off these kids, it really does pay off. The movie has some pretty awesome killing scenes in it, and this is also where some of the comedy starts to kick in my opinion. There was just something about the way that they executed the murder scenes that I thought was kind of funny, and I know I need therapy. But I mentioned that he kills everyone in this movie, and this does include some kids, but they don't actually show any kids being murdered on screen, which I think was a smart move. If you're trying to make a horror comedy, you know, showing some innocent little kids being killed isn't exactly the best way to tickle your audience's funny bone. And when I was talking about A Cadaver Christmas previously, I complained about the fact that the movie felt a little longer than it was, and this movie ended up going on for longer than I expected. But in the case of this, you know, there was a point where it could have just ended and it would have been fine, but then more stuff continued to happen, and it actually kept me interested. You know, it kind of made it felt like a more complete story, so I kind of like that. I will say there was one scene in the movie that could have been cut out, and it didn't really happen near the end. It was fairly early on. There was one scene that was spoken in English where this guy was explaining to some American tourists how the Santa Claus myth works in Europe. And I guess they were just trying to add some exposition for American audiences who weren't aware of this stuff. And it was kind of educational, but that's not necessarily what I was watching this movie for. If I needed anything to be explained for me, I could have just done some research. You know, if you're making a European movie, make it a European movie. But anyway, I'm just nitpicking at this point, despite the fact that Saint Nick does have its flaws, and despite the fact that I wouldn't exactly consider it a great film, it was still pretty damn entertaining as a whole. So if you're interested in seeing a weird slasher comedy for the holidays this year, then Saint Nick does come recommended. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about this movie. I hope y'all have a good one.